Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Conflict Specialist Show. I'm Dave Hilton, your host. We appreciate your patience with the technical difficulties we had here today. Now, I'm here today with Lee J. Berman, the founder and president of the American Institute of Mediation, also known as AIM, a commercial mediator with the Mediation Alliance, a mediator with PMA dispute resolution. He was also the director of Pepperdine Law School's Mediating the Litigated Case program from 2002 to 2009, and all of that, my friends, is just barely scraping the surface. Lee J., welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me.
All right, so to start, can you spend a couple of minutes kind of telling us more about your educational and professional background? Because, again, what I just mentioned was just a little sliver.
Oh, sure. Well, I've been mediating for 18 and a half years. I started in 94, started training as early as 95. And I came from a family clothing business I grew up in and was president of that company when I was in my mid-20s. I left and got into real estate development and worked with a rather large developer negotiating land deals primarily. And I watched their squeeze every nickel out of your opponent kind of approach to negotiation and thought there had to be a better way. So I took a mediation course to sharpen up my win-win negotiation skills and realized that this is what I wanted to do. And that was 1994, and I've been doing it ever since. I love every day of it.
Now, from what I understand, what I read of your bio, you literally went from 1994 when you took the course to under a year you were doing it full time.
Well, I actually never, interestingly, I never sat through, I didn't take my training at Pepperdine originally. I started with the LA County Bar program in March of 94.
Right.
And then I took a short hiatus from Los Angeles. I moved to Santa Barbara thinking it was for good. And I moved up there, started their multi-door courthouse, their court and next dispute resolution program. And while I was up there, I fell in love and got engaged and moved back to Los Angeles, at which point I sat down with Randy Lowry and Pete Robinson at Pepperdine, and they said, we'd love to have you come train with us. And I started to, and then they made me the director of the program.
Now, the majority of the guests that I've had on the show started their careers in law, so you're a minority of the people that I've had an opportunity to talk to. You're not an attorney. You didn't go to law school. Now, do you think that made it difficult for you or create limitations during your early career? Or did you find that it gave you maybe opportunities that our lawyer mediator colleagues don't have?
It's actually a little bit of both, David. It's changed some as mediation has matured also. When I first began, people would often ask what kind of law I practiced, and I'd explain that that's not my background, that I come from the world of business and negotiation, and that's sort of a background. I'm also not a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor or an architect or anything else. And yet my training is actually in, and my passion is about mediating. For me, it's about understanding. I think of mediation differently than the practice of law, vastly differently. If I can explain for a moment, I think that mediation is a little bit understanding law. It's a little bit understanding business. It's a little bit understanding psychology and how people think and how they process and how they are when they're in conflict. It's a little bit about understanding negotiation skills and strategy and both the hard schools of negotiation and the nuances that go on in that. And I think that we take all of that and some problem solver skills and everything else, and that's what makes a mediator. So to digress from your question for a moment, what I find is people who are attorneys have that muscle really well developed, that one of those 5 or 6, they get that law piece really well, and oftentimes don't have some of the other pieces. People who are psychologists or educators come from that school and have those things down really well and have to sharpen up in some other areas. So for me, I looked at it when I started and said, well, I'm going to be dealing in the shadow of the law. I need to understand more about this. And where I'd come from, I was negotiating contracts that were an inch thick and would take 18 months to negotiate and all that sort of thing. So I wasn't afraid of that side of the law, but I had a lot to learn. So I took more continuing legal education courses in my first 5 years than any small law firm probably did combined, because I knew that I wanted to understand and speak the language better and be able to play in that arena. And I knew that that was one skill I had to sharpen up. So as I was starting my practice, it did make it a challenge at first because it was a question I had to answer. But then every time somebody has a question like that for me, I take that as an invitation to educate them, to explain to them, and to open a dialogue with them. And ultimately, that's the thing that's helped me the most.
Yeah, I've noticed that whenever people ask me, well, what's your background, and I say broadcasting, they're like, well, were you a lawyer? Were you an attorney ahead of time? And you did TV broadcasting. I'm like, no, I was a DJ on a rock radio station. That's what I've done for most of my career. So the question about, well, how did you end up being interested in mediation and dispute resolution? I was like, well, big egos with people on the air. It was managing big egos that led me to my interest in this. Now, you've had the opportunity to mediate thousands of cases during your career, and you seem to have carved out that niche of working with complex multi-party commercial litigation cases. Now, did you have a special interest in that because of your real estate background, or did it just sort of happen because you're in California?
I think, well, yeah, there's a lot of litigation here in California. There's no question about that. It's one of the few things that we're not proud to lead the world in, I think. But I think the complex multi-party worked for me because in my mind always worked well that way, managing lots of details and putting the bigger pieces together. So for me, the multi-party cases had to do with, certainly with causes of action. They had to do with insurance and insurance coverage. They had to do with lots of moving pieces and everybody suing each other. I mean, I love a case with 5 parties involved where everybody has cross complaints against everybody else, and it's like a bowl of spaghetti we're trying to sort out. My mind just handles that and manages through those details well. And I think that the lawyers who handled those kinds of cases soon came to realize that I would look at that from a business perspective. I would manage what their clients needed and see through a lot of the litigation to see what their clients were really after and help them get to a resolution by sort of sorting through all that detail. So I think it's exciting. I think the most fun cases I've ever done have been when there are multiple plaintiffs. Oh, there goes my light. I'm going to apparently have to change this motion sensor in the room here. If I just get up and do a little dance.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll work with.
Sorry about that, Dave.
That's all right.
With multiple plaintiffs.
You're the only guest I've had that has danced so far, so I'll give you that. You've got
the little interpretive dance.
Yeah.
To quote Denise Madigan. But to me, the most fun cases I've had are when I've had multiple plaintiffs with the same defendant, and we've been having 3 rooms going at once. So we get a demand from the first room. We send a counter into that room. While they're considering it, we go talk to the second room, get a demand back from them, go into the third room, get a demand, take a counter offer back to the first room, and all of those moving pieces and all of those people's issues and personalities and the lawyer's issues and the lawyer's needs and all that sort of thing. I love keeping that all going all day long. And I've done those cases where we've done 14 hours a day like that. And at the end of the day, instead of being exhausted, I'm just exhilarated because I got to use all of my brain.
Yeah, it's the next day you're exhausted.
Exactly.
So now when you're working with those larger, more complex cases, what are some of the unique features and issues that you have to deal with? Because when you are dealing with multiple parties, it becomes more than just, one side or another side. You've got several different issues and several different sides, if you want to look at it that way. So what are some of those that you have to understand to be a successful mediator in cases like that?
The first is, I think in any kind of a case, one of the things that a mediator has to do really well is listen between the lines and hear the unstated. One of my favorite old expressions is, a wise man hears one word and understands 2. And for me, in those complex cases, it's easy to get sidetracked with all of the causes of action and all of the cross complaints and all the indemnity and all of the I don't mean to downplay it, but the legal mumbo jumbo, all of the legal filings that have been put in place to help a couple of business people, a handful of business people or whatever, get together and find a resolution to an issue. So what I'm trying to do is listen between I'm suing you for these 7 causes of action to why they're suing them for those things, what it is that they really want to have happen at the end of the day, and I stay singularly focused on that goal. So I may talk to them in the litigation language. And we may talk about the various strength of their causes of action, that perhaps the fraud cause of action is overreaching, and perhaps the intentional infliction of emotional distress is a bit overreaching, and perhaps the damages are kind of speculative. But when I'm having those conversations with them, what I'm really focused on is what that client says to the lawyer and me they really want, which is, I want this person to stop competing with me and taking all my trade secrets, or whatever the issue is at hand. So I think seeing through, understanding the legal aspects of it and how the parties are juxtaposed to one another, and seeing through that to what they really want at the end of the day, I see it like a business deal. And I think that's the difference. That's the biggest difference that in how I do mediation versus how I think most lawyers and retired judges do it, because I think they focus on the causes of action and the relative damages to each one, which I've watched clients, when I do that, I've watched clients become frustrated that they feel like nobody's listening to them, that I'm, me or whoever the mediator is only talking to their lawyer. And I think once you get the client involved, they want to cut through some of that and get right down to, if he'll do A, B, and C, then I'm happy. And so that's my focus is on the finish line from the starting line. I think that's a different perspective than some folks have.
Now, one of the articles that I read that you wrote, you said that, as a mediator, you have to take the position that you're looking at the big picture. Basically, you're in a helicopter 5,000 feet up, and you have a very interesting perspective about impasse in mediation being a fallacy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for that. I do believe that, and I'm sorry for the mediators out there, and I hope you're on board with this thought with me, but I really do believe that 90 to 95% of all of the impasses that occur in mediation are preventable, that the mediator needs to be in that helicopter you're talking about at 5,000 feet up. If the mediator is on the battlefield running back and forth between the two generals, they're not going to be able to see the big picture of what's going on. So the higher perspective and seeing the whole big picture and where those armies are marching to, I think is important for the mediator. And that, I think, applies whether we're talking about the negotiation and how the numbers are moving back and forth, or those items that are being negotiated. I think it has to do with the temperament of the parties and trying to keep it even in the two rooms. If one's exploding and one is calm and relaxed, and this one wants to get to a bottom line and get this thing done, and these people aren't sure they want to move much, and want to move in slower increments, I think we as mediators need to have that higher perspective and manage that entire process. I like to look at the mediator as the conductor of the orchestra, who sometimes has to quiet the strings and bring up the percussion or the horns or something like that. And I think that's part of what we're doing constantly throughout the process, is managing the balance. And my whole thing about the finish line, it's not like a race where the first one to get there wins. It's a different kind of a race where we all line up at the starting line together at 9 o'clock in the morning and say, good morning, I'm your mediator today. And the whole goal is to have us all arrive at the finish line at the same time. And I think that if the mediator has that perspective you're talking about, we can see those potentials for problems before they happen and address them before they become a problem and work through them rather than having them stop us like a dam.
Now, I'm glad you were talking about the finish line, that it's not a race. You shouldn't be in a hurry to do that, because I have a fascination with the concept of time, how cultures perceive time, how it affects decision-making, things like that. Now, I noticed on your website, when clients hire you for a full-day mediation, they literally get an all-day mediation. I mean, through midnight, if it's necessary for that mediation. Now, I've talked with other mediators and professionals who purposely create an artificial time constraint, which I find that interesting too, by limiting the amount of time for mediations, half days, whatever, or charging extra fees past 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever. So what is your opinion about those time limitations? Why do you not create an artificial time limitation?
It's a great question, and they really are two distinct schools of thought, and I see merit to both of them. I guess that's why I'm a mediator. But I can see why setting a 5 o'clock deadline manages people's expectations and moves them toward that deadline. But I find that, let me take a step back. There's an old adage. My brother's future father-in-law took him for a walk at their engagement dinner and said, Robert, I want to explain to you about marriage. Most people think it's a 50-50 proposition, but it's not. It's a 60-60 proposition because each person has to give more than they think they should have to in order for it to come out right. I look at mediation and negotiation the same way. So much of the negotiation that we're doing falls into the camp of compromising, which means that people have to give more than they think they should have to. And the part that falls into the school of collaborating, generally it takes longer to collaborate and come up with those win-win solutions and work out all the details and then document it in a legal document that captures all of that. So no matter which way we go with the negotiation, each takes longer than we think it will. So in my mind, if I'm trying to target a 5 o'clock, my sense is the parties get to where they think they should have to go by 5 o'clock, but there's inevitably more time left that we're going to need to close it up and get it done. My preference and my focus, as I've said, is on that finish line. I want to help us get there and get there with the momentum that we've started in the morning, with the progress we've created throughout the day, and get there at the end of the day where everybody's in agreement, all the details are worked out. More often than not, at the end of the day in my mediation, the parties are sitting together and chit-chatting or shaking hands or apologizing and doing all of that because we got there at a time where they had ample time to work through what they needed to, and they get to a resolution that's more complete and not as rushed. And then I can't overstate the importance of documenting it once we've got it done, because I think the documentation process makes us think about details that the negotiation process may not have fleshed out. So I find when the lawyers sit down at the end of the day, and most of the parties in my mediations are represented by counsel, when they sit down at the end of the day to put all of that together and to flesh out the details and have it in an enforceable agreement, what I find happens is they think of things we hadn't talked about yet, and I'd rather have them working those things out there when I'm there with them, even if it's 9 or 10 o'clock at night, than the next day back at their offices when they're maybe not in the same collaborative spirit they were.
Now, not only have you been the first guest on the show to dance for me, but also you are the first mediator guest that I've ever had that I have seen a picture of them dressed up like a member of the rock band Kiss, which as a rock DJ, that I did a double take when I saw that picture. But you have this concept, which I love, of heavy metal mediators. So tell me, what do you mean by heavy metal mediator?
Well, in fairness, it was Jeff Kitchaven who came up with the concept and came to me with it and said, let's do this together. Jeff's a colleague here in Los Angeles, another commercial mediator. And we decided to go and do a workshop that we really knew needed to impact people. So it was Jeff's idea that we got a makeup artist and we went out and bought the wigs and we put on his T-shirts and looked all rock and roll and all of that. And literally with full face painted Kiss makeup on, we did this 3-hour workshop together that was intended to make people realize that we mediators have to give those in the commercial marketplace what they want. And if what they want is some head bashing and some evaluation of what their case looks like and what a judge and a jury would do with their case and all of that, we have to do that. If what they want is something different, we have to be able to do that. But heavy metal mediation is about, let's take the touchy-feely side of mediation that is critical and is important in certain situations, and let's not become too married to that. Let's have an open mind to the notion that sometimes people need to get down and dirty and get some dirt under their fingernails, and sometimes things have to get a little bit out of control before we really know what's going on and can put them back in control in the way of a resolution. So heavy metal mediation is all about let the outer edges, pushing the edges of reality, let that all happen and learn how to manage that in that space too. Sometimes that means joint sessions where people are getting a little upset. I'm going to dance for you again, just since we're talking about music. I'm so sorry about this.
That's quite all right.
It's the price of being green, I guess.
Yeah, right. All right, so now we've talked about heavy metal mediators. So you say that there are places for that kind of touchy-feely mediation style. So I found that in a lot of places that I looked, especially as I'm starting my career in this field, that a lot of people have decided to identify themselves or brand themselves, if you will, specific styles of mediation. Now, from my marketing background and broadcasting background, it seems, and again, I'm biased at this, but it seems very limiting to me. But it seems like we sort of share that idea. So what is it about branding styles? Because I'm afraid that, one of the reasons I decided to do this show is because I found that most people don't know what it is we do as conflict specialists, despite the fact, that you have mediate.com, you have AIM out there, you have all of these wonderful organizations that promote this field. Still, the majority of people have absolutely no idea what mediators do, what arbitrators really do, what any kind of conflict specialist. So I'm wondering if it's hindering our field in general by identifying ourselves with specific styles when they barely understand what a mediator is, more or less what a transformative mediator is, or an evaluative. We know what that means, but most people don't. What's your thoughts on that?
I think your feeling about it, I think, is exactly right. And I think, David, it depends most on the context in which we're mediating. Yeah. If we're going into a workplace or into a school, university setting, or a hospital or something like that to mediate, those folks don't even know what we're there for, and they think of it like some legal process. Is that like arbitration? At the end of the day, you're going to tell us what to do, and all that sort of thing. If you're an attorney watching this, and you think that you've been in hundreds of mediations and you know what it is, I still want to have you, for a moment, suspend reality and think about what mediation encompasses. Because everybody in every one of those contexts, even two neighbors with a barking dog in a neighborhood mediation center, they've all been through mediation, and it's all been played out very, very differently in terms of how the process rolls out. I'm going to rely on one of my props here. It's a cut from the American Institute of Mediation. On the back, it says, "World-class training for the complete mediator." You probably can't see that, but the idea is, I think that a mediator needs to have all of the skills necessary to mediate in any of those contexts or with any of those styles. The perfect example is a medical malpractice case I was mediating one day. I had only been mediating about 500 cases worth. I think I was probably 6 or 7 years into my practice. Thought I knew what I was doing and had a lot left to learn. And what I found was I walked into the room, it was a wrongful death case, and I walked into the room with a grieving widow whose husband had only been gone 4 months, and with her lawyer. And I knew that I needed to be what we might just abbreviate as touchy-feely, but I really needed to connect with her. And what she needed from me as her mediator wasn't for me to say, "Great, how much are you looking for today?" What she needed for me to do was prop her up emotionally and give her the confidence and the stability and the safe place to know that she was going to be able to work through this and get to a resolution today. Then I'm going to the other room where I had the doctor, the insurance adjuster, and the young, starched white shirt, big firm lawyer. And I thought, well, I know how I have to be in here. I have to be this other style that's heavy metal, that's very evaluative, and knock them dead and talk about their liability with them and the damages that, potentially, and all that sort of thing, and the doctor's future career. Well, I tried that twice after going back and forth between the two rooms, and it didn't work. And in a moment, I finally got a glimpse of the doctor's eyes. And looking very much like my own today, I said, "How long has it been since you've had a good night's sleep?" And his eyes went to his shoes. And he said, at first he didn't say anything for a long while. Then he finally said, "It's been a while." And I said, "About 4 months since this happened?" And he said, "Yeah, about that." And I realized he needed that touchy-feely, if you will. He needed that emotional connection. He needed somebody to listen to him and not just bang him over the head as somebody who has potential liability and needs to focus on a lawsuit. So we did a diversion that probably lasted 45 minutes where I said to him, "I can't imagine what it must be like to be in your shoes." And he said, "No, Lee J, you can't." And I said, "I don't know how you do it. You studied all those years. You're trying to help a patient, and the patient has an unexpected outcome and ends up dying." And he said, "You don't understand." And he started to work up this head of steam and eventually exploded with anger, but in part because nobody had ever asked him how he felt before. people just told him how much trouble he was in. So the different styles and branding oneself with a particular style, I think I agree with you, is dangerous, because in a mediation like that, I needed to be able to be heavy metal. I needed to be able to be touchy-feely. I needed to call on the lawyer, the psychologist, all the sort of different parts that we have going on in our brain up there in order to get that case resolved. So I think that branding with one style, I agree with you, it's a little bit advanced for the marketplace right now. And I also think that it does limit one, because if I only had one set of skills to deliver in that particular mediation, I wouldn't have been able to get it done. So that's why we went with the complete mediator, because I think that every mediator needs to be complete and have that whole range of skills if they're going to be effective. And I think that when people hire us, they expect us to have that.
Now, many people start their mediation career or experience as a volunteer at a community mediation center or through some sort of court-sponsored program. I know you had a lot of experience doing that as well, but many of them can't seem to make that transition to a full-time career. Now, I know you have a few ideas about the reasons that happens. Can you share some of those?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, being a successful mediator is about a lot of things. And only one of those is how good one actually is as a mediator. I think the rest of what matters is, do they have the personality that makes people comfortable in working with them when those people are under stress and in a moment of high conflict? Another is, do they have the ability to keep those relationships with those repeat users warm, whether those are insurance adjusters or lawyers or institutions or a university or a hospital or whoever? Do they keep those relationships warm? Because sometimes we mediators can be a little bit like, we can be interchangeable commodities sometimes. Somebody will say to a legal secretary, we need a mediator for the 17th. Call and get us a mediator for the 17th. And that may not be the best way of selecting a mediator for any particular case. I think we have to make sure that we have relationships and a uniqueness about our style, something that's real or genuine or unique about us, so that people will remember us. And I think that a lot of folks are out there volunteering their efforts, and nobody has ever told them, nobody's ever had the conversation with them about how to market a practice and how to build relationships and build the foundation, that this isn't, you're not opening a dress shop from 10 to 5 and selling dresses to whoever walks in the door. It's a service business. They're hiring you. And I think that that's something that we need to think about as mediators, is how do we help them build relationships with us, understand who we are, value what we deliver that's unique from everybody else's, and how do we stay top of mind so that when that lawyer turns to that legal assistant and says, I need a mediator for the 17th, hopefully that's followed with, see if Lee J or Dave are available that day, because we want them to think of us top of mind. And I think those mediators who are volunteering, I think the biggest challenge is they're not doing that well enough, so that they may have done a great job in that room for 2, 3, 4 hours that day, but 6 weeks later, that same lawyer, if that's who their target audience is, that same lawyer has mediated with another 15 different mediators or something like that if they're doing a couple of mediations a week. So we have to work harder at building a practice, not just at being good mediators.
Now, I've spoken with lots of new mediators and seasoned mediators about this, and it seems to me, and again, since I come from a marketing background, marketing, advertising, branding, it somewhat comes naturally to me. I see the value of it, but it seems to almost be a taboo subject when you start talking about advertising, marketing, networking, branding. They get the deer in the headlights look, as I call it, that I just want to mediate cases. I don't want to have to, I don't want to have to go do all this or think about, the business side of it. I just want to do the mediation of the cases. So I find that in a lot of times that they're missing out on prime opportunities. Now, these are things that I know from reading your background that you've taken advantage of. I mean, you've gone out and you've done tons of speaking engagements, networking events. I mean, your market is lawyers, so what do? You are part of, attorney organizations, bar associations. You do the continuing legal education training, which there's no better way to get in front of lawyers than for them to have to sit in the room and listen to you train them. So I find that, of course, now we're giving away all your secrets, of how you've managed to build up your your career. So what is it about that you think frightens so many people in this industry?
Well, first of all, they're not secrets. I teach this to mediators everywhere because, frankly, I like a lot of us who are the core faculty at the Institute, um, I come from the school that says rising tides raise all boats, or all ships sail in rising tides, or whatever the expression is.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is that if mediators as a whole are all doing better, then we as a profession are doing better. So part of why we founded AIM was to raise the level of professionalism and success, frankly, amongst mediators, so that the more good mediation that's being done out there and the more good practice building, the better the profession is going to be as a result of it. So two answers to your question. The first is, think about where mediators come from. Because it's a relatively new profession in the sense of formalized mediation in the courts and in the legal system and in workplaces and all of that, most of us moved laterally from another profession. We came from law, we came from psychology, but most folks can't come from the bench. Most folks come from something else. But if you think about lawyers in a big firm and lawyers who weren't allowed to advertise at all until a decade ago or something, psychologists and judges, those folks as a group are not those who are most comfortable with the concepts of marketing or advertising. Lawyers in a big firm, judges who are on the bench, are given a caseload typically, and somebody hands them a case file and says, here's your next case. And so they get to do what they do in that arena. Time for an intermission dance again. I'm so sorry. I'm hoping you have great editing features on this.
Actually, I'm not editing it at all. I'm leaving it all up there. We get your dancing skills. Now, I know that you're a member of several mediation organizations and groups. Now, when someone is starting out as a mediator, I've heard all sorts of different recommendations, and I wanted to get your take on this. Do you recommend that people who are starting out join several of those groups, or should they pick one or two and focus their efforts on building their practice, building their networking with the people they want to serve? What's kind of your stance on that?
Absolutely the latter of what you said, David. The people should focus on a couple of key, so they should try them all once and see what they like and check them out, but then focus on 2, maybe 3 organizations and put their time and effort into those. Get into leadership roles in those organizations for some visibility and to demonstrate those mediator skills and bring them with you when you go to those community meetings. Sometimes I see mediators who leave those skills at home when they go be themselves. But I think the biggest misconception is that success in our world can be gained by a very broad and shallow marketing umbrella where you're reaching a lot of people, but only once or twice each. The truth is it's the opposite. If you have a very narrow and deep marketing window and the same people see you over and over, it creates credibility, it creates reliability and familiarity, all of which you need in a service-oriented business like we have to get hired. The other thing is we haven't talked much about the provider organizations that are out there. Myself, after 17 years as an independent mediator, I joined PMA Dispute Resolution in Southern California because they can do for me a lot of those things that are behind the scenes, whether they're the ones marketing and advertising me and my brand rather than me saying, hire me, I'm great. They're the ones who do all the case management and all the behind-the-scenes management of my practice now. And I think that's something that for those folks who aren't comfortable with marketing and advertising and networking and who maybe aren't good at operations of a business, of a practice, whether it's the billing and collecting or the confirming and all those sorts of things. That's another option for those folks is the mediation provider organizations or agencies that are out there who'll do that for them for a share of their income. And I think that's a good marriage for some folks.
And in a lot of cases, that actually brings you almost instantaneous credibility because of some of the other people that are on the roster of those organizations.
Yes. It's very interesting that there's a point with newer mediators where the organization lends its credibility to the new mediators until the new mediators build a reputation and become very seasoned, very popular, and in demand. Then they lend their credibility to the organization. So there's that relationship that as the mediator grows, they add more value and need less from the organization. But for newer mediators especially, it does add instant credibility. It's a very good point.
Now, that's a lot of the stuff we've already talked about, I know, is some of the inspiration to why you created the American Institute of Mediation. But can you tell us a little bit of the other reasons you decided to do that in 2008?
Absolutely. Thank you. What I found is I had a hunger as mediation was changing and evolving and becoming more complex. I didn't see a lot of the training organizations around updating and changing their trainings. So many of them were teaching the same skills that we learned in the early 90s that were a little bit robotic, a little bit formulaic, and it just really weren't what was working in the rooms. I guess I've got the benefit that I'm not an academic. I'm not a professor. Two more things I'm not. So, I'm not in an ivory tower somewhere teaching out of a textbook, and not that all of them are, but as an extreme, they understand the theories of mediation and the principles of it. As a mediator myself, as a practitioner who's in the trenches, I can walk into a training course on a Friday and say, here's what happened Wednesday, and here's what I used, and here's how I took this skill that we're talking about and put it to work. And I think that's something that is important to educate mediators properly. And I had a desire to get out on the cutting edge. Starting in about 2008, so many new evolving things were happening. As mediation started to look outside of our own field into fields like neuroscience and game theory and other places like that, and more studies were coming out about how lawyers and mediators make decisions and how we negotiate and all of that. And I thought these are things that mediators need to know. This cutting edge stuff, these tools that are actually usable in the room right now. And I had a hunger to teach that. So I knew that I wanted to work with Doug Knoll. He and I had been teaching a course called Harnessing the Power of the Master Mediator for a couple of years that became one of our flagship courses for the Institute. But I also knew others of like minds who might have an interest. So I approached Ken Clove, who I know you've had on your show. I approached Erica Fox. I approached Woody Mostyn. I approached Mel Rubin and asked them each. We all were teaching at the time in academic institutions. And I said, are there things that you want to teach, that you have a passion to, that your academic coursework doesn't give you the ability to do? And they each said, absolutely. There are all these things I'm reading about that I'm excited about, and I don't have a forum to teach them in. So I asked them if they'd be interested in coming on board as a core faculty and having that be the mission of this institute. Would they join us? And every one of them, without hesitation, said absolutely. And we've had some real fun. We've had some fun teaching courses that I don't think you find anywhere else. That's the thing I think that makes us different is we talk about neuropsychology and neurobiology and neuroeconomics, and we talk about neurolinguistic programming that's been around for a while. And Woody Mostyn is passionate about teaching the business of mediation so that mediators leave that course with a business plan and a marketing plan, because most of them don't know how to do either of those things and don't, and need to if you're going to succeed and treat their mediation practice like a business and like a professional practice. So those are the things we were all passionate about teaching, and that's kind of how we came together with that mission in mind, to help prepare mediators to be, as we said, more complete and more prepared for what's out there in the world, and more effective and more successful.
Now, one of the things that you offer through AIM is what you call the Mediator Starter Kit. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is exactly?
Sure. It's actually the compilation of all of the forms and documents and everything that we use in running my mediation practice. And we found that people coming through the training course were saying, well, how do I do this? How do I do a letter of engagement with parties who want to hire me to mediate for them? And, what if they ask me for a settlement agreement, or how do I do a confidentiality agreement? And rather than sort of teaching a whole course on it in itself, I said, why don't we just take my forms, let's make them all generic and take all of the names out. But it's basically, somebody once called it just add water, which I really like, because it's basically a mediation practice on a thumb drive or a notebook binder. And it's got all the form letters that you need to introduce yourself, to confirm the mediation, to find out who's going to be there, to do all the back office paperwork. And it's got confidentiality agreements and settlement agreement forms, and it's got invoice forms and billing forms and tracking spreadsheets and everything that we use, right down to the rubber stamp that we put on the front of the file folder so that we can check the progress and status of a case. That's in there in an Excel spreadsheet that they can take to the printer and have a rubber stamp made. So we tried to say, if somebody, like you did a few years ago, Dave, if somebody comes to this from a field other than mediation and says, I want to start a practice, what can we help them by putting in their hands so that they'll have this tool and not have to sit down with a blank piece of paper and start writing all this stuff out? And we thought, let's price it so that it's less than a billing hour and make it something that's useful to the people who come through the course. And gosh, we've sold tons and tons of them over the years. People really like it because it saves them all that work.
And you actually include it with a lot of the other training courses that you offer through AIM.
We do. We offer it at a discount if they want to bundle it with some of the courses. I think the more tools we can give people when they come through, they realize the 40-hour basic course, at the end of the last day, they realize there's more they need. So what we try to do is, from the feedback that we get from people who come through the course and from their evaluations, we try to figure out what their needs are, what we can help them with, and bundle it on the front end and say, if you want the Mediator Starter Kit, and let's say William Austin's book about building a mediation practice and some other tools, we'll bundle those with the course so that they leave here with everything they need in their arms. That's our hope.
Now, something else that you do very, very well is social media. You are on social media all the time, do a lot of online stuff. Now, do you find your potential clients using that? Do they learn about you through social media, or do you use that primarily for networking with other conflict specialists?
No, it's both. I think the networking with other conflict specialists is really under the auspices of the AIM Institute because they are our constituency and they are our network of people that we want to share ideas and come up with best thinking and develop new courses with. When I think about my mediation practice, I use them all differently. I think that LinkedIn, for example, is a great way to stay in touch with people and demonstrate to them the articles that we're reading, the cases we're following, the seminars we're going to and that we're giving and that sort of thing. And I think that helps establish our professional credibility. On the other hand, I think the Facebook page, I've got, 40, 50 lawyers or 60 or 70 lawyers probably who I mediate for who are Facebook friends of mine. And I see their kids' pictures that they post and they see me building IKEA furniture in my garage last weekend. But I think part of what that does is it really humanizes us with each other. So when they walk in for a mediation, look, we're in a big city. I'm in Los Angeles. There are 40,000 members of the Los Angeles County Bar Association. Wow. 40,000 members just in this county. So in order for me to build that relationship like we were talking about, I want to have that non-professional, that fully personal relationship with them. So when they walk in the door with a client, I have something to talk to them about more than, hey, that last case we settled 6 months ago, that went pretty well, didn't it? Now I can talk to them about, I saw the pictures of your kids and your vacation. Looks like you had so much fun. Then their client becomes more comfortable with them, with me, with our relationship. And I think that social media is just another extension of our ability to build relationships because we just can't go to lunch with people every couple of weeks and stay fresh with them that way like we might like to otherwise.
Now, you say building relationships is key, and I completely agree with that. So I'm going to ask a question of you right now that I've asked every other guest that I've had on this show. Can you think of one or two people in this field who you feel have inspired you, had a large impact on your career, or taught you the most? I'll let you dance, and then you can answer the question.
I'm mostly dancing off camera now just because the censor has to see me. So one or two people who've had influence on me, and what else, Dave?
That was it, who have inspired you, had the largest impact on your career, or taught you the most?
Boy, it's a long list. I'm grateful to a lot of people, and I'm not just stretching. I mean, when you ask the question, I can't think of one or two. I can think of like 7 or 8 because there have been so many. Bill Hobbs was my first trainer ever, and he's no longer with us, but he's somebody who helped me grasp the concept of how this was different than a compromise, how win-win and collaboration could be a part of it. Richard Millen was like a grandfather to me and was a godfather of mediation here in Southern California and wrote a lot and spoke a lot about mediation from kind of a very Zen place. He mediated until he was 87 years old and just had a dramatic impact on me and my career. He was like Yoda in Star Wars. He was just that kind of wise. Randy Lowry and Pete Robinson are two people who I've trained alongside of for so many years, for 10 years or something. And I've learned so much from both of them. They're both very different, and I've learned so much from working alongside of both of them as a trainer and as a mediator both. Nina Meyerding and Denise Madigan are two more who come from that Pepperdine group that I worked alongside of for years, and I continue to learn from both of them. Nina especially, when she's out keynoting conferences, I learn pages of notes of new things every time I'm in front of her. And Ken Cloak is another one who's that way. Every time Ken gives a workshop or something, I try to be there if I can, because his mind works differently than mine and most of the traditional mediators that we know. And I love his insights. I love his perceptions and the way he does things. And he's inspired me in a lot of ways in terms of my approach. Jim Alamed is another one. And you can see as I'm naming these folks, it's no coincidence that they're core faculty of the Institute, because I looked at them and said, these are people who changed my life and my practice years and years ago. Jim was my second and third trainer. I took 2 courses from him. Right after my first course, I took 2 advanced courses from him and thought he was amazing. And when I started as a trainer, I considered it a successful day of training if I felt like I was doing a good impression of Jim Malaman when I first started out. So these are people I have an incredible amount of respect for and who have shaped my profession. I mean, there are many, many more, but those are the ones I think who have most influenced me and how I do what I do as a mediator and what makes me effective.
You know, despite as much training and all of the time that I've spent learning, going through the program at SMU in Dallas and getting the master's degree, I found that, you know, you never stop learning. Not only do you learn when you're doing mediations, when you're working with clients, but you continue to learn through people like you and through, you know, people you've already worked with. So I want to give you an opportunity to promote any upcoming training programs, projects, speaking engagements, or anything else you want to mention before we wrap up here today.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Well, let's see. I'm on the road. It's as we speak right now, it's the end of August and headed into the fall. So, gosh, let's see. I am on the road doing a day and a half training for the Indiana Association of Mediators in November, December. I'm doing my 40-hour basic course here in Los Angeles for the AIM Institute, the Mediating Commercial and Litigated Cases, it's called, and that's December 4th through 8th. The whole AIM Institute is doing an advanced track at the Southern California Mediation Association annual conference, November 3rd. And I'm actually honored to be emceeing and giving Pete Robinson the Cloak Millen Award, named after Ken Cloak and Richard Millen, which is the Peacemaker of the Year Award from the Southern California Mediation Association, on that Friday night, November 2nd. And then November 3rd all day, we're doing an advanced track at that conference with just our faculty, Woody Mostyn, Jim Malamed, Ken Cloak, and I are all doing workshops at a very, very advanced level at that conference. And I'm hoping to return to SMU next summer for the executive education program. Have a couple of other things we're working on in Texas and Ohio that I'm hoping to be able to announce soon. And if you go to my webpage at mediationtools.com/training, that'll show you at least where I'm training coming up. And if you go to the AIM Institute page, the American Institute of Mediation.com, we've got the What's New page that tells you all of our faculty members and where they're speaking at conferences and training both for us and elsewhere around the country. So they're too many to name, but hopefully folks will come out and see us.
Now, you are coming to, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're coming to Dallas sometime in December as well to do advanced mediation, right?
Thank you. Yes, December 13th. Gene Roberts, I'm sorry. September 13th. December 13th. Yeah. December 13th. I'm going to be in Dallas for the Dallas Bar ADR section. We're doing a full day. I think it's the first time they've done this kind of thing. I'm really looking forward to it. A full day advanced mediation training, and Gene Roberts has done an amazing job of putting it together. It's I believe it's going to be at the Delo Mansion. I'm positive it is now that I think about it. And it should be a great day of advanced mediation training in Dallas, December 13th.
Now, of course, the only reason I bring that up is completely selfish because I plan on being there that day. So that's why I brought it up, right? So, Lee J, again, thank you. Do what? Say it again.
I look forward to seeing you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I've taken up plenty of your time, almost a full hour here. So, again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time. Now, if you want more information about Lee J., be sure to visit his websites. You can check out leejberman.com. You can also check out mediationtools.com or the American Institute of Mediation website, which is americaninstituteofmediation.com. You can also follow him on Twitter directly. He's there at LeeJB. I know I keep track of his tweets all the time. Now, if you have any questions or comments for me or Lee J about anything we discussed in today's episode, or if you have topic or guest suggestions for future episodes of the Conflict Specialist Show, you can leave them in the comments down below. Also, I encourage you to check out the official home of the Conflict Specialist Show. Our website is conflictengagementspecialists.com. That is with an S. You can also follow me on Twitter. You can find me there at Engage Conflict, and also my financial conflict coach, which is at Money Conflicts. Well, again, Lee J., thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I appreciate your time.
David, my pleasure. I love that you're doing this show. It's a wonderful thing for the whole industry, and your on-air talents are put to great use here. I appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And everybody else, see you next time.